Hello, and thank you for joining us on Mapping the Zone, a podcast dedicated to highly fixated reviews of large, dense books, specifically the works and context of Thomas Pynchon. My name is Will. I'm one of the co-hosts,
My name is Cody.
I'm Luke.
and today we're discussing chapters 37 through 39 of Bleeding Edge. Unfortunately, Kate couldn't be here today, and I really, personally, I'm going to say that she's the one who's missing out the most. But it sadly might be the case that the listeners are, because I'm sure she has a lot of valuable insights on these chapters.
I think she did mention last week that she was pretty bummed about missing these particular chapters. So
Yeah,
maybe if she wants to add something next week, we'll throw it in there.
Yeah, hope she does. Regardless, we must sally on. The show must go on, etc. So, just to get us started, what are either of what are both of your general thoughts on the chapters? There we go.
These chapters, I think, reminded me of part of what I really love about Pynchon's later work, the everything Vineland and on, in that it is still as dense as Gravity's Rainbow was, but it adds a dimension of readability that I don't necessarily have to always focus on all the little minutia that's happening and all the little references that are going on. I can literally just sit and read and enjoy this book, just in terms of its sheer plot. And these Inherent Vice is another good one where it feels almost the most adventureful in a sense. I mean, Against the Day, you could probably make the claim that that's literally the more adventureful of his novels, but I think the story alone that is in here, and especially as we're getting this close to the end now, and the plot is just kind of really accelerating, and we're wrapping up certain storylines, and certain characters are going. But I just found myself engrossed in the story at times, and I would have to stop myself and go back to remember to go through and highlight the things I wanted to talk about, and pull threads here and there. I just had a lot of fun reading these particular chapters.
Yeah, I like these chapters just fine. I do kind of wish that we were given a little bit more. If there's more of a focus on the conspiracy that kind of dominates the earlier parts of the book. In this kind of falling action section. That being said, there are some pretty hallucinatory parts of this section, which are fun. And overall, it is kind of dreamlike in some ways, and we do get a little bit of action yet again, which is always kind of nice in a Pynchon novel. I do enjoy the way that he writes action sequences because he's generally pretty concise about it. Yeah, I like this section. It's not my favorite, but it was pretty entertaining. Held my attention. Yeah.
Yeah, all those high points you pointed out there, Luke, I can't disagree with at all. But I do find it funny that, Cody, you mentioned that this section really reminds you of that shift in Pynchon's style after his hiatus. Because for me, these chapters reminded me so intensely of some of my favorite parts of The Crying of Lot 49.
I got that vibe too. Absolutely got that.
You're not wrong about the style, because if this were in The Crying of Lot 49, a page would have been a paragraph or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm very glad that I left that caveat last episode in my overall consideration of the previous episode section, because, yeah, this is absolutely, well, okay, never mind. This is a section that I enjoyed so much that I'm not going to say this is my favorite section, because while I did skim ahead through the end, I might find myself in the same position next week saying that the final two chapters are my favorites. But I do really love this set of chapters. The whole arc of Maxine's dealing with Windust's death is just so beautifully drawn out, and the insight we get into his earlier life and the insight we get into Maxine's working through all of these separate issues in her life, whether it's the conspiracy or it's the the general concerns of being a mother of two children, or it's everyday life stuff. It's just it all comes together so intensely beautifully for me.
Yeah, there's a lot packed into these chapters, and some of it, and especially, I'm glad you mentioned the getting the knowledge we get about Windust's background during Maxine's conversation with Jamara. That's one of my favorite parts of the whole book. That I think it really there's so much added to Maxine as a character in these 3 chapters, especially in the way that she's getting more information about not just the people that she's been interacting with, but kind of learning more about herself throughout all of that as well. Just really adds so much to her as a character. And I really do, the further we get through this and the closer we get to the end of it, Maxine, I think, is very quickly becoming one of my favorite Pynchon protagonists.
Yeah, as I've said before, I might not necessarily agree with the statement that this book as a whole has the best characterization of all of his novels thus far, at least. But I think it's very hard to argue that Maxine is not his best developed protagonist.
Absolutely.
But moving more into the minutia, chapter 37 opens up with Maxine considering which gun she's going to take on her supposed rendezvous with Nicholas Windust. Did either of you have any thoughts about that opening paragraph? Because on one level, for me, it's just kind of fun. It's some nice genre work, but it's also just it is one of those moments where you're stepping into Maxine's perspective, and it's funny that she herself is saying, at least it isn't the ladies' model.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love it as in its hard-boiled, noirish fun. That whole if handguns had conscious careers, it might consider a promotion. Such a good line. But yeah, it's a great way of showing Maxine's inner thoughts, as you mentioned, and I'm sure I don't know enough about guns to really know terribly how much of a difference either one would make aside from the Bond comparisons, but I think it's a nice way of showing Maxine kind of overthinking this situation maybe, and paying way too much attention to something that really should be a probably pretty simple decision.
Yeah, I'm no gun expert either, but my understanding is that the Beretta is more associated with police forces and special ops,
Mm-hmm.
and the Walther PPK is just so consumed culturally by the James Bond and just general Cold Wariness that it's not a terribly popular one, but it is sleek and small. So
It does look nice, yeah.
it's got that laser in the grip.
Yeah.
And so after she finally makes up her mind, she moves along into the apartment building of Windust, and we get some really beautiful scene setting, whether it's the sky over New Jersey, a pale battle flag of the ancient nation of winter, divided horizontally, hex thistle above, buttermilk yellow below, or it's just some of the little details about the actual building. And she shimmies her way into, she shimmies her way past the building door lock with one of her children's game cards from ESPN Zone, which honestly I didn't know existed, even though
I didn't either.
Yeah, very much around throughout my life. Do you know anything about it personally, Luke?
Yeah, I went to the ESPN Zone in New York City growing up. I remember there were commercials for it on ESPN, and I was pretty into sports. When
Is
I
it like a
was
Hard Rock Cafe but with sports?
I actually don't remember the actual ESPN Zone very well. I believe it was more of like an arcade with like sports related games in it.
Okay.
Maybe a listener can correct me, or I can talk to my family about it and see if they remember it any better. I do remember like the cards that she's talking about and being like nagging my parents about wanting to go whenever we were in New York City. I don't know if there are any like other places in America, any ESPN zones in other places. But from what I remember, yeah, it's like an arcade, but it's basically all the games are sports related.
Interesting.
Yeah, from my brief research, it seems almost like it was almost like a weird themed version of Dave and Buster's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
where
could see that.
it's like a proto barcade, except that it's child friendly, and for some reason, it's also owned and operated by ESPN and all sports themed, which just really weird when you lay it all out like that.
Yeah.
But she makes her way into the apartment, and we get some very intense moments where Maxine is confronting these, I assume, stray dogs that have just wandered into Windust's apartment with the door having been left open apparently. And unpleasantly, uh the dogs seem to have been helping themselves to the free meal.
Yeah, it's a really very tense scene that plays out there, and the way it's described is beautifully written. And I don't want to bring up what I want to bring up until a little bit later here, but I was when I got to a certain part a little bit after this, it made me go back and kind of reread the section to try and figure out what was going on throughout it.
Yeah, from whether it's because of just the sheer tension of everything that's happening, or it's that mixed with Maxine's, you know, starting to lose her shit a little bit. It's really disorienting at the same time so engaging, because you have lines like their muzzles are darker colored than they need to be,
Mm-hmm.
which is such unnecessary foreshadowing, because what's going on. Like the foreshadowing in the previous chapter is, to me at least, fairly clear, and also it's literally just later on the page. But it's that kind of little touch, just chef's kiss kind of moment.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was wondering, did either of you do either of you understand what's going on with the "Don't I Remember You" from Westminster last year? Or is it just
No.
Maxine deflecting her emotions?
That's what I got out of it. I couldn't. Yeah, I had nothing else on that.
Yeah, I think it's just her trying to deal with the situation with comedy.
Yeah, yeah, that's all I read out of it. Although some of the other breed conversation there is just, again, more nice touches. But so she goes in and she confronts the body of Nicholas Windust, satisfies her own curiosity to confirm his identity, and immediately starts freaking out and reciting to herself a slightly altered rhyme uh, back when she was jumping rope with her pals as a young girl. And the alteration goes, I'm going to try to pronounce it in the way I think it's meant to be read. Dead says the doctor, dead says the nurse, dead said the lady with the alligator purse.
Spot on, I think.
Thank you. Just first of all, because I'm Will, in case anyone forgot. I need to point out that it's a bit of a crying of Lot 49. Maybe not callback per se, but it's that same kind of thing with the girls skipping rope to the Tristeros. What I don't remember the specific words, but skipping rope to a rhyme that has to do with Tristero.
Mhm.
But more accurate, or more specifically to this book, it's just a horribly grim moment.
Really is. It's very disturbing. Just like if you really visualize what's going on and her singing that while she's going through this, it's intensely disturbing.
Yeah, and up until this point in the book, we've had plenty of reason to believe that Maxine is, not necessarily unstable, not certainly not crazy. She's very rational. She's very focused and very determined and very organized. But she is not, quite emotionally healthy, to put it lightly. Her response to seeing the body of someone who she probably had some feelings for is to s- start thinking about the dog shows and sing to herself a little jump rope rhyme. And even with those deflections, she can't handle it and goes to vomit in the toilet, which is just a really, really beautiful, beautifully disgusting paragraph. Would either of you like to read it?
I've got it right here. So yeah, this is on page 410. She stumbles to the toilet, hits the exhaust fan, and kneels on the cold tiles beneath the racket of the fan. Contents of the bowl give a slight but unmistakable surge upward, as if trying to communicate. She vomits, seized in a vision of all the exhaust ducts from every dismal office and forgotten transient space of the city, all feeding by way of a gigantic manifold into a single pipe, roaring away in a constant wind of anal gas, bad breath, and decaying tissue, venting as you'd expect someplace over in New Jersey. As meantime, in the gratings over each one of these million vents, grease goes on, collecting forever in the slots and louvers, and the dust rising and falling is held there, accumulating over the years in a blackened brown secret fur, merciless powder blue light, black and white floral wallpaper, her own unstable reflection in the mirror. There's vomit on the sleeve of her coat. She tries to wash it out with cold water. Nothing works. It is, as you said, Will. It's a very beautifully visceral representation of what's going on, and it's I mean, it's obviously it's gross, but it's written in such a way that it feels real and doesn't really cross that line into just like being uncomfortably gross.
Yeah, and on top of just the aesthetics of it all, which are so intense and, like you said, visceral, it's also just, I mean, it's brimming with Pynchonisms. From talking about New York City venting its horrible off-gassings into New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
or the use of the word louver, which is always good to see. Really, really underused term. But even just the line of the black and brown secret fur, it took me a second to realize what that referred to, but it's just such an accurate description of that crud that builds up in a vent.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Moving along though, we do get to see kind of the absolute capstone of Maxine's troubles with reality, which we'll get into later in chapter 38 in particular, I think. But she is beginning to see the lady with the alligator purse. And did either of you have any specific thoughts on that?
Nothing specific. It took me a minute to. I had to kind of go back and forth with that because I thought at first that I missed her introduction earlier, and then I had to. And then I realized that she was really just a figment of Maxine's imagination. But I think this is I think as good a point as any to bring up my question. Do either of you feel like she may not actually be in reality at this part of the chapter? Is she maybe still in Deep Archer? And I ask that because at once she leaves here and gets back home and everything, it's not until page 413 that it says back in Manhattan meat space. When in the earlier times we've seen the phrase meat space is after she's come from Deep Archer back into reality. So that had me wondering if this whole scene is just taking place inside of Deep Archer still, and she is at the point of almost being completely unable to discern reality from virtual reality.
I mean, that would explain some things. Like the jump from chapter 36 into 37 is pretty abrupt, where there's no lead up to her visiting Windust's apartment. And then later in these chapters, we do get the whole Ziggy and Otis playing around in a virtual reality thing that's like a version of Manhattan and New York City. So it definitely seems to be possible that in Deep Archer there is at least parts of Deep Archer that are based on New York City. I think it's supposed to be unclear, and it's supposed to kind of have elements of both virtual reality and reality. I think it's supposed to kind of blur the lines between the two. I don't think you can really say for sure that it's one or the other.
Yeah, that hadn't occurred to me at all. I don't see that interpretation as terribly compelling, but not because I don't see what you're pointing at. I just interpreted the back in Manhattan meat space as more a comment on the you know, she's away from this nightmare moment, which
Mm.
it's ambiguous. It's used that way,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe to drive it exactly what you're saying.
No, I got you. But yeah, that's as far as the lady with the alligator purse, that's what got my mind kind of reeling on that. But that just, I mean, her presence there just adds another layer of disturbing imagery to this whole thing.
Yeah, I guess my only real issue with the Deep Archer interpretation is that somebody would have had to make it, and clearly people are putting things in Deep Archer, either the dead or some nefarious individuals are putting things in Deep Archer to confuse and to blur these lines, maybe intentionally, maybe not. But it does seem like they would have to have quite a detailed understanding of Maxine's mind to pull out those kinds of things and put them into Deep Archer. And of course, she could just be hallucinating while
Yeah.
while going through this virtual version of Windust's apartment.
I think it's also the lady with the alligator purse thing is also probably supposed to add to the how similar to a horror movie this first section is.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I had only I when I read it through at first, I really only interpreted the lady with the alligator purse as, just Maxine projecting, some part of herself outward. But I on the next page, um, we get the line, on the way out, she passes a mirror, takes an automatic look, sees a blurred moving figure, maybe herself, likely something else. The lady again, all in shadow except for a single highlight off her wedding band, whose color, if you could taste light, which for a moment she imagines she can, you'd have to call faintly bitter. Which, if it is just her seeing herself in the mirror and her not being willing to accept that because, she's going through a pretty stressful moment, I do find the mention of the wedding band quite curious because I don't get the
Mhm.
sense that Maxine's begun wearing her wedding band again or anything. I see it as a little bit, maybe as like an angel of death kind of thing. I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting way to say it. Yeah.
Not necessarily, again, not in a real sense, but in this sense of like a psychic projection of what Maxine thinks of death as.
Mhm.
But anyway, Maxine is trying to talk herself through this, trying to dispel the emotions she's feeling, trying to talk herself into hating this man who she clearly doesn't. And she riffles through his pockets and finds absolutely nothing. And I found it interesting that it may just be the narrator, but talk about going out clean. At least he's consistent. He was never in this for the money. Well, that may be the case, but empty pockets when somebody has been assassinated seems like par for the course, personally.
Mhm.
And that's a curious moment because if it's the narrator's voice, then that seems very out of place. And if it's Maxine's voice, well, she should know better than to think that if this government hitman had been hit by his own folks, as she theorizes later, they would take his ID. They would take all of this stuff.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. Like Maxine is, I think, a competent enough detective to have really should have been able to piece those clues together. But at the same time, she could be. She's obviously not in her complete right mind in this moment. So she might not be, firing on all cylinders, so to speak, and maybe just kind of glossing over something like that, in the way that she does, and just thinking, rather than thinking of the situation in terms of an investigation, she's thinking of it surely in terms of Windust as a person. And it, yeah, it would make sense that he wouldn't have anything on him, but does it really though? Like if he's in this situation in this place and gets taken out later, as you mentioned, he later thinks that it was an inside job. I would think she would, connect that and think that there should have been something that maybe someone took something off of him, or that, it seems like he would have left something for her as a final thing, which that'll come into play later. But yeah, it seemed like a curious thing that she just kind of let that go, because that seems a little off.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a really that's kind of how I read it. I think that's a really good way to put it as well. So, she begins to wonder, who was it in Deep Archer, as we have been for the last few chapters after the beginning of the conversation about, well, there are dead people there. But then the really creepy thing happens, creepier than the dogs eating the body, creepier than this, uh, I guess, kind of totemic figure of the woman with the alligator purse. The phone rings, goes to voicemail because Maxine, as out of her mind as she may be in this moment, she is not dumb enough to pick up the phone. Uh, and the voice, which is framed as one she doesn't recognize, whispers, "We know you're there. You don't have to pick up. This is just a reminder that it's a school night and you never know when your kids might need you with." I mean, if this is all set in Deep Archer, I mean, the whole situation is clearly a threat to her.
Mhm.
But if it's not in Deep Archer, well, there you go. You have the you have the explicit threat.
Yep. Yeah, that is such a chilling scene right there.
Yeah, just the idea that even in the context where we're assuming an an all powerful intelligence apparatus that is tracking everything she does online, and whether it's Windust's spirit telling her to meet up with him, or it's someone impersonating him, or just some amalgam of random algorithms gone amok. Somebody finds the logs of her talking to the amalgam of Windust online and knows where she's going, and knows who she is, knows that she's gonna be there at the moment, tracing her cell phone, assumedly, and threatens her children. So she rushes out and makes her way along the road and kind of realizes that she is, not in Manhattan, and she can't just hail a cab. She can't just get on the subway or on a metro bus. She has to find her way to one of any of those things. And she's going through all of the emotional and mental processing that, somebody whose children have just been threatened would go through.
Mm-hmm.
Talking herself into, okay, these are the people Ziggy and Otis should be with. These people should be trustworthy. These people should be capable. But are they? Is anyone? And as horrifying as the previous scene is, this is, I don't know if there's a better word than harrowing to read her thought process.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, and I think that's the most ominous part of that threat that she got in that phone call. It's not that they call and they say, "We know you're in there, and we've got people outside waiting for you," or we're going to send people after you or whatever. They explicitly refer to her kids because they know that's how they're going to get her. And whether it's if it is in reality, and she, that is a call that happened, and whoever it was knows who she is, and that she has kids, and they're kind of reminding her of their reach and their power. Or if this is all in Maxine's mind, and she's just kind of starting at the brink of just kind of losing her grip on reality, and this is her kind of subconscious, like, reminding her, hey, you have kids at home. What are you doing here? Either way, it's an incredibly intense scene, and especially when she goes out into the night, not no cops, no cabs, just darkness all around, and a wind picking up. It's such a just a tense moment.
Yeah, and even with all of this on her mind, even with all of this, brink of panic, and maybe true is like true loss of sense of reality, and however you want to call it, all of this stress, it's Maxine, so she takes the time to fondly recall at least for a moment, judging plenty of women who I think, as most of us who have watched sitcoms, or I imagine it's come up in some dramas that none are coming to mind, of people, going out and hailing a cab that is nowhere to be seen, like they're just going to summon one out of nowhere.
Right.
But it doesn't just stay there. She remembers judging those women, and then she has a moment of realization that maybe it's not all entitlement. Maybe it is just someone somewhere has to be looking out for me, and realizing that that's where she is right now. It's maybe a more intense moment than coming out of a bar late at night with no cabs around. But shades of gray.
Hmm.
But then we get the back in Manhattan meet space paragraph, which you pointed to earlier, Cody, which I would like to, again, being Will, refer back to the Crying of Lot 49 and the discussion of highways and roads as, veins of cities. And here we have the pavement like a black river is itself flowing away forever uptown.
Such a great line.
It's really lovely, because at the very least, even though it's kind of horrible to imagine asphalt being a sea or a river that flows and pulls things along it, it's kind of peaceful at the same time.
Mhm.
Well, she gets home, and to maybe her surprise, I think to a lot of readers' surprise, I can't remember what my thoughts were when I first read through it, but Otis and Fiona are at home. Ziggy's there too. Everything's fine. And we get a really fun little insert of a fake Scooby-Doo movie.
I've been in the habit of listening to audiobooks before falling asleep. And one time a few weeks ago, I fell asleep listening to the chapters for that week, and I woke up right when this section started, which is pretty funny to kind of wake up and then hear the punchline of Medellin kids and everything.
Yeah.
The Medellin Kids punchline, I think, might have actually been the first thing I learned about this book, beside the fact that, the main character's name was Maxine Tarnow and it was set surrounding 9/11. And honestly, I have to be, I've seen a few different people online over the few years since I first learned about this book and dove into Pynchon, that I don't like this joke. I think it's
Really?
fun. I think it's funny, but I think it's I don't think it lands personally.
Okay. I thought it was great.
I like it a good amount. It's
It's a
definitely
good fun.
it's a dad joke,
Oh,
definitely.
it for sure is. Yeah.
Yeah. What I would like to say in favor of this whole scene, because it is as a whole quite enjoyable. It reminds me very intensely, and I'm sure this is kind of where it came from. There was a Scooby Doo TV movie that I think came out in actually the early 2000s. That was Scooby and the gang go to a city in northern Mexico where they find the chupacabra, basically.
Okay.
And I watched it a lot as a kid because it was on TV a lot, I think, mostly. But I always liked it quite a bit, and it's fun to it's fun to think about Pynchon seeing that and realizing that he could make a meddling kids pun on Medellin
Hmm.
if he just twists it a little bit.
I do think there's also just the scenario is funny. The idea of there being a Scooby Doo episode in which they take on a drug cartel in South America is that seems more like that's venturing more into like Venture Brothers territory where they're playing with the Scooby Doo ideas. But just that concept alone had me chuckling, and then I had forgotten about that joke. So when it came in again, I laughed pretty heartily.
Yeah, like I said, I do love the scene. I love the idea of Scooby Goes Latin in 1990, and for some reason, them helping out essentially the DEA, even though they're not helping a specific agent. I think that's all very funny. I just think the punchline had been a little
Telegraph.
bit overhyped for me personally.
Oh, okay.
While everything seems to be fine when she gets home, Maxine very quickly finds out that well, that threat may not have just been, poking at a sore point. It might have actually been a real threat because it turns out that Ziggy was finishing up his Krav Maga class, and suddenly somebody had broken in through a back entrance, which Emma, the Krav Maga trainer, to remind everybody, had very conveniently set up a flashbang on a tripwire, and the two of them, Emma and Ziggy, are able to effectively apprehend and, as it's phrased, dispose of this, what appears to be some kind of private contractor sent to attack, maybe Emma, given the threat, probably Ziggy. And that's, it's not just a shoe dropping, it's also just horrible to imagine this actual threat being real to the extent that they're sending people after her children. And it's, maybe by the grace of God, maybe by the grace of Miss Levin being actually a sleeper cell, that her child is still alive, or at the very least still, in Manhattan.
Yeah, that's a really fun scene for a couple of reasons. I think I really enjoyed it in its just the sort of action description of it, and all the sort of espionage background that Emma might have, whether she's a sleeper cell or just on call 24/7 as she responded to that. But then also the interplay between Ziggy and Maxine, where she's kind of trying to suss out, like, is that really what happened, or is this, are you kind of playing with embellishing the story a little bit? Which, that is definitely something that teenagers would do, not to discredit the event itself, but, there is a tendency to sort of, color in a little more of the details a little more floridly for someone of that age. So I think regardless of whether it happened the way Ziggy lays it out, the fact of the matter is it's confirming to Maxine that, there is a real threat trailing her at this point, and it's just kind of, deepening her motherly instincts to keep her kids safe, because God knows Horst isn't going to do anything. So this was a really fun section to read.
I personally think that Ziggy might have embellished his own role in it. I do kind of struggle with a martial arts instructor allowing a 12 or 13 or 14-year-old to fight military contractors,
Right.
and not, I don't know. And I do have a theory about this. It's my first venture into the conspiracy corner actually on this
Ooh.
podcast. But
Congratulations, welcome.
yeah, so the fact that Verva is the one picking up Otis and that they try to attack Ziggy at the Krav Maga thing, it makes me think that the attempted kidnapping was intentionally was supposed to be a failure, because if Otis would be a far easier target, with just Verba protecting him. Otis would be a much easier target, and you have to imagine that, like, I don't. It's just kind of seems a little odd to me that you would choose the child that's at the martial arts instruction over the child that's just being protected by a random adult. And that it does kind of strike me as, whoever planned out this operation just planned it out for it to fail so that Maxine would get a warning, and that, some, like, whoever was paid was hurt but not killed, perhaps. I do think the whole that whole operation was planned, for it to be a failure. I also do kind of struggle with, the plan had succeeded and Ziggy was actually kidnapped. What's the end game there?
Mhm.
Um, if it is, possibly the CIA, or I don't really know if Gabriel Ice would be implicated, but, some government agency or something is trying to kidnap Ziggy. Like, what's the end game? You're like, you're not going to demand a ransom. I would imagine he would probably have just been held for 12, 24 hours and then just kind of dropped somewhere with a cell phone and told instructions to call his mom or something. But yeah, that's my little conspiracy, is that the whole operation was planned, maybe without the people's knowledge that enacted it. without their knowledge, but it was planned to fail.
Yeah, I can't help but agree that I think Ziggy probably did embellish his role because as much as Ziggy might be some Krav Maga, what's the word I'm looking for? Prodigy.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it doesn't really make sense for somebody who is, clearly a very well trained and very competent fighter like Emma would need or want Ziggy to be involved in this because it's an unnecessary risk and
Yeah.
it's
She's
one guy.
technically his caretaker at that moment. So yeah, I can't imagine she's going to let him go buck wild and take on somebody like that.
And if he is being backup, we're talking about a guy who has been thrown across a room after being flashbanged that he's just like going and kicking
Yeah.
maybe.
Just kind of roughing him up while he's already down. Luke, though, I think that's an interesting way to approach that. I hadn't really thought about that, but it kind of makes sense. Like that would be a good way to send a message without really creating too much more trouble to clean up later. Um, you can ensure that Maxine knows that whoever this is isn't just making idle threats, but at the same time, if you don't actually take someone, then you don't have to worry about the repercussions of doing that. You still get your message out, but you don't have to worry about the potential cleanup. So that's actually pretty. I still don't think we have an actual conspiracy yet, but welcome to the conspiracy corner.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree. Especially I had kind of similar thoughts, especially with the note that Emma gets with the flowers that are delivered the next day. It's described a note in Hebrew to the effect that all will be well. That seems really strange. If
Mhm.
Yeah, if it isn't some kind of intended something beyond a hitman going in with a specific goal of kidnapping or killing Ziggy. But at the very least, it's hard to doubt Emma's sincerity. She wouldn't have called Maxine. She wouldn't have needed the note if she was in on it. But yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think you're probably correct. But I do think that it's fairly unlikely. As Ziggy says, it's bad karma to lie about those kinds of things. And maybe he's happy to lie about how much he contributed to the defense. But it does seem like maybe a step too far to say that there was a Glock with an oversized magazine.
Yeah.
And that's not the kind of thing that I think, as Horst describes him, a normal New York creep or something.
Hmm.
That's
Standard
not
New
a
York creep. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's not that's not something as any normal criminal's gonna have because you
Yeah.
don't need an extended magazine. Anywho, moving on, we do get some fun bickering between Otis and Fiona as they're arguing over, I imagine, the contract having to do with her Halo movie, where between these two scenes, you have kind of a nice, slightly more subtle flash to the, overall idea of adults becoming more infantilized or infantilizing themselves, and children, trying to become adults as soon as possible here, just in these two scenes.
Hmm.
Because, listen to me, Fee. Lose the perpetuity language, you'll regret it. It's only boilerplate. Setjifan says I can walk anytime I want. You believe that? He's a recruiter. Now you're acting like a jealous boyfriend. Real mature, Fiona. Just it's right out of a Hollywood script.
Yep. Absolutely is.
And well, at this point, Horst comes back in. Well, not back in, but he comes back from work and notices that something's up with Maxine, and she lets him believe that all that's upsetting him is the as he says, the standard New York creep. And it's a really nice paragraph there. Just it's pure interiority, which is, despite this being a post hiatus Pynchon novel, it's not very often that you get just thoughts in this book,
Hmm.
and it's nice to see that. Well, moving on, the next day, M11 calls, as referred to. Some nice humor, like Naftali knows flowers exist. He sees them at a corner market, but he still thinks there's something to eat, which, he's such a flaneur. You'd think he'd know how flowers work. But hey,
Evidently not.
appetites differ.
Yeah.
And Maxine is happy to accept that as confirmation of Ziggy's story. Well, maybe not happy, but suffices. And we get a very strange exchange where Horst basically says that the two of them sleeping together is like committing adultery, only different.
What a weird thing to say to the person they're still technically married. So, or no, are they? Are they actually divorced? Or are they just like either way?
They're divorced. It is a weird thing to say, just in terms of it makes it seem like he wants to commit adultery, or that like
Right.
he finds adultery like attractive or sexy or something.
He's trying to normalize it. Yeah.
It's a really weird thing to say.
It's very problematic, Horst.
Mm-hmm.
It is a strange phrasing, the way that because he's rediscovering his quasi ex-wife as an object of lust. It does frame it as though they are only separated, when I do think that they are divorced. It is weird.
Either way, it's creepy and weird, and just kind of continues to paint Horst in this as this very unflattering person who I still don't understand Maxine's willingness to keep him around.
Yeah, like I think the most charitable reading of it's like committing adultery, only different, is oh, there's an edge to this. It's not just sex. It's not just sleeping with my wife. It's something exciting and out of the ordinary, as though
Mhm.
this is not a relatively ordinary situation.
It's taboo.
Yep, very taboo to get back together with the parent of your children. But no, I think you're right. It if it were just that line, if it weren't for the allusions to abuse, then it would just be weird and awkward.
Yeah, he would just be
But-
an aloof dude who just made a weird comment.
But like the towards the end of the previous page on 415, I mean, the reason that Maxine doesn't go into anything about wind dust, even though clearly she needs emotional support in this moment for so many reasons, especially given that the standard New York creep was sent to at the very
Mhm.
least threaten her. The line is, she knows what this honest, never to be wised up face can change into, knows she better let this ride unless she wants to collapse under whatever it is, call it guilt, settles for nodding. I was curious whether either of you interpreted that as, or well, really what you interpreted that line to imply, because to me, especially with the, again, the allegations of abuse and the probability of those allegations being true, and the weird line in the following scene, it doesn't seem like it's just like, oh, if he hears something this bad, he's really gonna be torn up, and I can't handle that right now. It does seem maybe darker.
No, it definitely does. I got that vibe as well, and especially with the line that you mentioned on 415, but then right after the committing adultery line where it talks about him, plus Horst's insane suspicion of every man, ghost, or whatever who gets within ass grabbing distance of her, and since it does not take too much to shift in her own perversity level here, well, I'm going too far in that. Anyway, this is absolutely pointing more towards Horst just being a shitty person and a terrible partner, and if Maxine is that uncomfortable around him that she can't feel comfortable sharing what might be the most harrowing and frightening moment of her life up to this point, can't share that with this person, like that speaks volumes about Horst as a person.
Yeah, and it's not like she's just like keeping it to herself for the afternoon. It would be
No.
one thing to sit on it for the evening and then bring it up, but she doesn't, and she has no plans to change it, as that sentence that you just read implies.
Yeah, she is terrified of how he will react because she knows how he will react. She can't. That's the last thing she needs in this moment.
But as we've seen with him staying up late and choosing to sleep in rather than go into the office that he and his partner rented in the World Trade Center on 9/11, and his general acuity with um, spotting stocks and commodities to invest in. There's something about Horst. He picks up on it, whatever it is in his frame of reference, and he lets her borrow the Impala.
Which comes with strings attached also.
Well, sure, but at the very least, it's a nice gesture.
For Horst, yeah, I guess it's about as nice as it can get.
No, exactly. Yeah, if it were anyone else, it would be the least he could do. But
Yeah.
what she does with the Impala is go to visit her parents, where the kids are staying for the week, and we get an interesting little survey of the apartment, including what really stood out to me in a way that I really couldn't nail down why was Elaine's dining room museum of long operating light bulbs. We've all read Gravity's Rainbow. Their light bulbs are an important part of that,
Mm-hmm.
especially long lived ones. And I tried to dig into the history of Sylvania. And I didn't spend too much time on it, but Sylvania was at one point an American company, but these days, before the publication of this book, but definitely after 2001, purchased by a conglomerate of German electrical manufacturing companies who were definitely would have been the ones to build Byron. So I'm not really sure what that gets at. It's just a little too salient personally to let it go.
I hadn't thought anything about that in particular, but now you've got my mind spinning on that. So I'm curious if there's something there.
It seems almost obvious, but obviously nothing. So I don't know.
Mhm.
Anywho, so she finds Ernie watching a never distributed Marx Brothers version of Don Giovanni with Groucho in the title role, which is a nice setting for a really just sweet moment where a father and daughter get to connect over, I guess, shared interests. As Ernie mentions, she's never sat through an opera before, even though
Which
I
is
think yeah,
generous to call the Marx Brothers interpretation of Don Giovanni an opera, but I'd watch it for sure.
gotta be interesting.
I mean, I love the Marx Brothers, so I would, I'm sure they would have made an interesting go at that.
Yeah, and we've seen that Ernie and Elaine's love of opera did not get passed down to
No.
Maxine, but it is nice that she's at least with the buffer of the Marx Brothers honking some horns, willing to sit down and have a moment with her dad.
I think for Maxine, it's just that's what she needed, was seeing an area where there can be comfort, and she knows that there can be a safe, comfortable place that she can at the very least, just sit down and start to kind of try and unpack things. But the fact that Ernie's there, I think, makes it even better for her, as we'll see as the conversation that they have goes forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sweet moment, I wouldn't say disappears because it seems like being Ernie and Elaine and having Maxine and Brooke as kids, I'm sure that this kind of kvetching and political theorizing is, at the very least, a comfortable white noise.
Mhm.
But it is a significantly less sweet moment almost instantly, where Ernie dives into his theories about the the reasons why the internet cannot be trusted as anything but a source of further propaganda, in the same way that, as he identifies, police shows were when Maxine was a child, and if not just propaganda, then maybe even an all-encompassing surveillance network. And this is a fairly wide conversation. I think it covers at least 2 full pages. So, we're not going to go through it line by line or anything. And a lot of this stuff has been discussed between the lot of us on this show already. But did either of you have any uh, thoughts on this scene in particular?
I felt like this scene was, we've talked in previous episodes throughout this book about how there are conversations that take place, whether it's between Maxine and March Kelleher or an earlier conversation that Maxine had with Ernie, where it really, really feels like this is Pynchon talking to the reader directly. And this, I think, might be the culmination of all of those. And it not only to me really felt like him talking to us as readers directly, but it also seemed like a conversation between the old him and the younger him. A lot of this, the DARPANET stuff traces back to the Lot 49 and Gravity's Rainbow topics that came up in those books, and I think this just feels very much like him. As we've said before, this is that whole like I've been telling you for 50 plus years about what's going on and what's going to happen going forward, and no one wanted to listen. And here it is now, and I can trace it all back point by point and show you exactly where these things have happened and how this all got set up over all those years, and we all just let it happen because we played exactly into it as they wanted us to. We were complacent and we let them build everything around us while we basically just guinea pigged it and allowed it to enshroud our entire lives. And I think specifically the line that got me the most was when it says Ernie begins channel surfing as if an annoyance. Call it freedom. It's based on control. Everybody connected together. Impossible anybody should get lost ever again. Take the next step. Connect it to these cell phones. You've got a total web of surveillance, inescapable. You remember the comics and the daily news? Dick Tracy's wrist radio? It'll be everywhere. The rubes will be begging to wear one. Handcuffs of the future. Terrific. What they dream about at the Pentagon. Worldwide martial law. I mean, that it's like I said, this is, I think, the culmination of everything he's been talking about, not just in this book, but in his career at this point. And it had to feel cathartic, I think, for him to write this, but it also, I would imagine, would have been very frustrating because, again, this is just him throwing up his hands and saying, I don't know what else to do. I've put it all out in front of everybody, and here we are. Now we're just handing them the keys to our houses, letting them invade every part of our lives, and we gobble it up.
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts on this conversation. Whenever I was growing up, we've covered this in the podcast, and I'm around Pynchon's son's age, and my parents were very against me watching not necessarily cop shows or shows that involve cops, but specifically the show Cops, the reality TV show where it's like body cam footage. But me and my brother and my sister, but especially me and my brother, would always try to sneak watching that, and my parents would always get mad. Not super mad, but just kind of like, you shouldn't watch that, and kind of explain that, we shouldn't glorify that type of stuff. So it does. I mean, I'm probably projecting, but I do think that it's possible that Pynchon had a conversation with his son about those kind of shows, and that he stuck it in here just because he found it interesting. And I do think it is also interesting that Ernie points out that the portrayal, that the way that these kind of shows, like detective shows and that kind of stuff, portray criminals, changed after the '60s, where they used to be kind of lovable criminals, and then now they're all like super villainous. Which is interesting and definitely a very Pynchon thing to point out. Just something that he kind of gets into a little bit in Inherent Vice as well. That being said, I do think it's Ernie's whole speech about the birth of the internet, what the internet came from, what the internet was birthed out of, how it's like their invention. I'm kind of surprised that T isn't capitalized in there. That does remind me of, I think we've covered this on the podcast, I want to say, and if we haven't, this is a piece of information. This is biographical information about Pynchon that pretty much all Pynchon heads probably know at this point. But Pynchon, whenever he was a technical writer at Boeing, he worked on the Beaumark project, which I believe was basically what Ernie is talking about here, where it's, in case of a nuclear apocalypse, the Beaumark project was like a series of like connections between different nuclear missile bases, to where if like it was basically like it decentralized the communications between nuclear bases, so that if one base was taken out or a central hub was taken out, that the rest of the bases could still communicate with one another and coordinate with one another. And Pynchon would have had a lot of direct knowledge about that because, like I said, he was a technical writer for that project for Boeing. So, Pynchon was himself kind of played his own role in the early days of what became the internet. And I do think that is, like, y'all made a good point in that. And that it kind of annoyed me in this conversation that Pynchon seems to be directly talking to the reader, where Ernie, is kind of going off in a way that I don't really feel like Maxine necessarily deserves, because I don't really think Maxine is. I guess she's shown to be a little bit naive about the internet, but I don't think she's as naive in general as Ernie seems to treat her in this scene. And it is kind of a lot of. It's a bit of an information dump, which I can get kind of annoyed with authors for doing that, where it seems a little preachy in some ways. That being said, it is good information for the reader to have. And yeah, I did enjoy this conversation a good amount and did find it pretty edifying.
I mean, I'll say that while I don't disagree, this is a little bit much in terms of the self-insert stuff. I do think that the way Ernie has been written as a character is to a large extent justifies the the choice of the character to be ranting at Maxine like this, because for being a Gentile, this is how my grandfather was growing up. He would just go on massive rants about how stupid and naive, my parents and my generation were, and we were missing such obvious things. Now, he wasn't talking about how the internet is a conspiracy built to subdue and capture any possible, however specifically you want to define it, but to prevent any fight back against the military-industrial complex as it's framed in this media context. He was talking about how it's all the Muslims trying to get one over on us, that kind of thing. But I read Ernie as a lot of that kind of person, so it doesn't bother me that much. But I do agree that in like a very zoomed out kind of way, it does feel indulgent. And this is if anybody like not to repudiate them because I think they were justified. Anybody listening to the Vineland wrap up episodes where Seth from Waste Mailing List and Kate were kind of sniggering at me saying kind of what Maxine was saying here. One aspect of this that I think is one of those situations where, well, we have to be honest. Thomas Pynchon, writing this book, was in his 70s. He's an old man from a previous era, and as forward thinking as he was, as willing to educate himself and learn how the world around him changed and learn how people view the world, because as we all have complimented throughout this book, the way that he captures the culture of the moment and the way that people were thinking about the internet is really right on the dot. And while there are little things that don't quite ring true about his way of framing hacker culture, the fact is that he was a 60 or at the time of 2000, he was a 60-year-old man trying to keep up with things, and he did a pretty damn good job, if you ask me. I do think that this is one of those things where, and maybe this shouldn't go out into the world, because maybe the powers that be shouldn't hear this. The certainty that Ernie has here of call it freedom, it's based on control, everybody connected together. That's absolutely true, and the threat there is real, and the surveillance is powerful, and the propaganda is terrifying. All of that's the case. But I do think that there's kind of a fundamental error of thinking there, where you have this attitude from the perspective of the people designing this surveillance. If you want to take Pynchon at his word and assume he's correct, that the internet as it was developed as an intentional surveillance network and propaganda machine, those people tend to have an issue confronting their own limitations. The machine can only see what the machine can see. and what is on the network is on the network. And when everybody's always filming their lives and putting that stuff on, it's all dangerous, and it's all power. It's not all hype and powerful, but it is all of it is powerful. But I do think that this might be one of those things where Pynchon was raised in the culture of people who then went to work for the Rand Corporation. He was raised in that world. He went to Cornell. He worked for Boeing. And yes, he was part of the counterculture. Even, maybe not the counterculture, but he was definitely counterculture. But the fact remains that all of these things are limited. God can see everything, and we think of things like the internet and the CIA and intelligence agencies and all of these things as the eye of God because it's helpful to avoid stepping on God's toes when, like it or not, no matter how true anything that I'm pointing out here may be, they still have guns, they still have nukes, they can kill people whenever they want and come up with a reason that makes it not a problem for the wider world. But I think that there's a possible error in thinking where, yes, it might be based on control. Yes, it might be based on Bomark. Yes, it might be based on an attempt to surveil and to control information. And it might be effective in both of those things, but that doesn't mean that it is God, So that's my defense. Very lately returned. But yeah, I do think that it's a really enjoyable scene at the very least, even if it is a little bit grating, especially for people like us who have read Kate's not quite all of Pynchon's books, but all of us here have read all of Pynchon's books, and at this point, it does get a little old to hear the same thing he's pointing at across multiple novels be recapitulated very abruptly.
Yeah, I mean that's a fair point. And I mean I guess it becomes a question then of I don't want to say do we forgive him for doing, because that sounds a little bit ass kissy, but is it, I guess, is it earned? Is it, can it be justified by saying that there has been a sense of urgency throughout it all, and he's felt like not enough people have been paying attention, and that as a result we've put ourselves into this situation, and we have in a sense lost the right to complain about it? I mean, that because that kind of gets at what Vineland was getting at as well with what happened in the 80s was, all the people complaining about the 80s and the Reagan era hypercapitalism that was starting up then. A lot of those people were complicit in allowing it to start in the first place. So it's kind of a, how do you can't have your cake and eat it too kind of situation. Do we think it's the same kind of thing here?
Well, personally, I'm not, imagining being somebody like Thomas Pynchon, somebody who's praised immediately upon publishing his first book, and his second book gets no less acclaim, even if, he doesn't hold it in high esteem. And then, comes back with Gravity's Rainbow, which half the people who read it said it was horrible and like Nazi apologia, and the other half treated it like it was, some coming of Jesus. And then 40 years after that, seeing that nobody listened, seeing that all of the things that, you can call it foretold, all the things that he expected, all the things that he, saw reason to expect, regardless of how you want to frame it exactly. I don't begrudge him it. I think I think a lot of this book can be viewed as him getting that "I told you so" off his chest. And like I said, I do think that Ernie is the kind of person who would go on this long,
Oh, for sure.
undeserved, but not wrong rant.
Yeah.
So
It's
it
just been
doesn't
bottled up
bother
for a
me.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I think personally the worst thing I would say about it is that it's a little indulgent. which,
Yeah.
it's Thomas Pynchon. If that's your issue, get over it.
Yeah.
What about you, Luke? Do you hold it against him?
Not really. I mean, it's if it was like I could think of other authors, like Neil Stevenson would probably go on about go on about it for like 10, 15 pages. It's not like the conversation is like super, super long or even super, super pandering or anything. It's nice and concise. Like he makes his point, he gets out of there. It doesn't really bother me too much.
Yeah, like I said, I get where you're coming from. I do find it a little bit grating, but that's coming from the perspective of people who have read most of, if not all of his works.
Mhm.
That's coming from people who decided to make a Thomas Pynchon podcast. The fact that him, at the end of his career, even if this isn't necessarily his last book, it's the end of his career regardless, saying, "Come on, y'all, I told you so." I think
Yeah.
he deserves to be able to do that without getting harangued.
I think it's he's allowed to be a little bit indulgent from time to time. And I don't, like Luke said, I don't think it's really crossing a line where it feels ham-fisted or overlong. So
Well, and all of this leads Maxine because like I said, this is probably the kind of thing she grew up hearing. Ernie doesn't seem like the kind of guy who he got this way from sitting in front of the TV after he retired. He seems like he probably was making these kinds of rants her entire life. And maybe it's in that kind of reading, she's relaxed by it enough to finally unload what is going through her head regarding Windust on her father, which, on some level, I think some people would criticize that choice. But I do think that if anybody's gonna, if you need to get something off your chest and you can't go to one of your parents and they're still around, that's sad. Not sadder necessarily than not being able to go to Horst with it. It's just good that she has Ernie to talk to about these things with, because he might not understand, clearly kind of doesn't, but at the very least he's thinking on the level of being willing to entertain it as a hit job and as not her making some stuff up.
yeah, I really liked his reaction to everything that she laid out for him. It comes off as very compassionate and like you said, he doesn't necessarily have to understand or agree with all of it even, but he clearly cares about his daughter and her well-being, and that is evident there. And I think that is not just what Maxine was looking for, but what she needed as well, was that kind of grounded compassion that she knew she could find.
Yeah, I don't have too many specific thoughts on the conversation till the very end there, but we do get a nice moment of, you know, even if he can't understand why she would make the choices that she made, Ernie does, like I think all decent parents do, blame himself. And Maxine can connect to that with, thinking about how worried she is for the future of her own children.
Hmm?
The fact that, she was she was asking Ernie and Elaine these questions and he didn't have any good answers, and now she's gotten to the point where her own kids are asking her those questions. And she doesn't have any better ones. Answers, that is.
Yeah.
But I do really love at the moment the fact that Ernie, who, as has been made pretty clear, pretty strong counterculture, definitely IWW aligned kind of guy, referring to, like Joe Hill always says, don't mourn, organize. And on some level, that attitude might be why Maxine struggles so deeply with, not being able to feel her own emotions
Mhm.
and projects them onto hallucinations of, ladies with alligator purses.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's not wrong. If she walked around wearing black, even subconsciously just not wanting to wear colorful clothes because she's feeling bad, you know, that gives whoever sent the attacker an indication that they got at her. And better
Yeah.
to not do that, at least. Well, do either of you have any further thoughts on this chapter?
I just have a small note. Earlier in the chapter, Pynchon does he describes an area of New York City as one of those first-person shooter kinds of towns, which does seem to imply that it's like an open world or something, which I was kind of confused about. I do think it's kind of a bit of a typo in terms of around the time this book is set and around the time this book came out, like first-person shooters were very much like on rails. You know, like you don't explore the world. You're just kind of going through a preset set of missions where you're not exploring. That's about the only thing I really had is that I think that is an example of Pynchon. Perhaps, yeah, I think he might be thinking of Grand Theft Auto or something. Grand Theft Auto isn't a first person shooter, so I did find that kind of odd, and perhaps a typo.
Yeah, I mean, I think you might be right on it with the not first person shooter, but definitely GTA, unless he was playing Fahrenheit Indigo Prophecy. Only moments in that game are first person. So yeah, I don't. That's a good point. I interpreted it as more of kind of the commentary on the way that the whole like, oh, it's like I was in a movie, that kind of thing. Just
Mhm.
her, having spent so much time online that's kind of where her head is at. But it's interesting. Anyway, moving on to chapter 38. Maxine goes to visit her wonderful psychotherapist, as described beautifully as some idiot servant.
I love that. That's such.
It made me laugh quite a bit. It seems like, at least from Maxine's perspective, all he has to say is so you had feelings for him, huh? And as I've been chanting this entire season of the show, finally, that's too much. That's enough of Sean just repeating back what she says to him. That's enough of nothing from this guy she's paying to help her work through things. And she says, "All right, I'm done. See ya. I'm settling the bill, and I'm leaving." And I couldn't quite discern what Sean meant by this, but he says, "Maxie, it's time. I reached this point with everybody. What you need to deal with now is the wisdom." And then he delivers maybe absolutely nothing that he clearly thinks is very insightful. And before I dig lightly into my probably absolutely insane theories about how to interpret that sentence, I was curious, what do y'all think Sean is thinking with this? Does he clearly thinks it's a meaningful sentiment? Do you think he thinks it's gonna keep Maxine coming back to the well, or do you think this is like, okay, you don't need me anymore. Take this with you.
I think I would fall more on the latter side of that. It definitely feels like Sean believes that what he's saying is deep and meaningful in a way that he maybe can't explain. But I don't think, as we've talked about before in previous scenes with Sean, he is that kind of. It almost comes off as a sort of trope in a lot of TV shows and movies of the psychiatrist who never really provides any meaningful insight to anything. They just are basically a sound or a wall in a sense for the patient to bounce their ideas off, and basically allows them to work their own thoughts out. And they don't really do any more than that. And I think Sean is a mixture of that and this sort of borderline new age psychotherapy concept of there being deep meaning in shallow pools, so to speak. And he's deluded himself into believing and buying into that concept. And so he can just say things like, it is what it is. And in his mind, it means the world and it's a life changing affirmation. But it really has no meaning or really value to Maxine, I don't think.
Yeah, I was personally expecting whatever he was going to say to be not it is what it is, basically. I was expecting something a little bit more in depth, although, it's Sean, so
Mhm.
I don't know why I was expecting that.
Like going to the dude for therapy.
Yeah. I was a little bit surprised. I guess I mean I have a friend that says it is what it is a lot, and I didn't realize it was that phrase went back even before. I assume before the early 2000s. That's what all I had for that is I was surprised by how not in depth it was, and then surprised that that quote is that particular piece of like slang or whatever has been around for so long.
I don't know if it's just my I'm as we've covered. I am a literal baby. I mean, I always interpreted it is what it is, not necessarily as like being around since time immemorial, but as being pretty dang old.
I think
I
it
don't
is
know.
a older um, phrase. I don't know. I haven't looked into the etymology of it, but I'm sure it goes back pretty far.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels like a phrase, kind of like that's life, that might have just been borrowed from French. These days, we have the idea of like the French existentialist philosopher smoking cigarettes and talking about how life is meaningless, but at least we get to smoke our Gauloise. Um, but that attitude, the flaneur, it's a French word for a reason. That attitude has been around much longer than you know Albert Camus.
It might not be as old as we think. I just did a quick Google search on it, and according to dictionary.com, the it may have appeared as early as 1949. I
Yeah.
thought going back much further than that, but that's apparently like published. That seems to be as far back as it can be traced. I don't know. If anybody listening knows more about the origins of that phrase, I would love to kind of dive into that because I've been hearing it a lot from my kids because they found out because uh, my daughter is still in her bilingual school. My son finished with it a couple years ago, but they have learned that if you spell the word socks in English, it is the Spanish phrase for it is what it is, SOCKS. So I've been hearing that a lot lately at the house.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I've, I think at some point I heard that the socks thing before, but I didn't remember it. That's
I'm
funny.
sure I had at some point, but yeah, I totally forgot about it until they started going at it again. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I don't. Do you? I mean, is Luke or Will? Do you feel like there's something deeper as far as Sean using that as a mantra towards Maxine, or does it just come off as kind of a shitty therapist thing?
Like part of my understanding of Buddhism is that it's very it tries to ground you in reality, and tries to you're not it's not unlike say Christianity, which maybe encourages going out and changing the world and converting people and all this stuff, whereas Buddhism might be a little bit more like accepting the world as it is, accepting people as they are, meeting them halfway. All these different kind of like live, laugh, love type stuff is coming into my head. But I think it does strike me as particularly as if not Buddhist, then at least kind of more of an Eastern way of looking at things. Yeah, as opposed to like maybe a Christian or more of a Western way of looking at it.
Yeah, from the perspective of like a personal mantra, I can totally understand why somebody would have "it is what it is" as an important piece of wisdom to remember. Whether you take it as acceptance, or you take it as don't make mountains out of molehills. On that level, at the very least, it can be a grounding phrase. But in that more Buddhist, more you know quote unquote Eastern religion framing, it does become much deeper in that sense of like there is there is only samsara. There is only what is in front of you is what is in front of you. Don't make this thing. Don't try to presume that you can take what is in front of you and generalize it. Don't try to take what is in front of you and think it says anything more than what it is. Don't fret over these things, not just in this acceptance or not making mountains out of molehills thing, but don't step beyond your capacity as a person, right? You can only see things as they are because that's what they are, and rephrasing them doesn't change what they are.
Mhm.
But I do have some very stupid theories on what specifically Sean says. Because, yes, what he says, I think, is most usefully framed as a stoner surfer kind of over elaboration on the concept of it is what it is. Which, if you think that's a very silly thing to keep as a personal mantra, sure. But, as far as things go, there's some validity in doing so. But the way he expands on it is very silly.
Mhm.
And just to highlight the reasons why I don't think that is where the end of the interpretation of this exchange goes. And this is not conspiracy corner. This is just me staring at 11 words for hours in the last few days. So, the most naive way to read this, not to say naive in an insulting way, but in the, you're not overthinking it way. The full sentence is, the wisdom is what it is it is what it is. However, very specifically, there are quotes nested within his speech quotes, which are not necessary, except to delineate that the wisdom is not part of the wisdom. The term the wisdom is not the start of the sentence. That the full wisdom is what it is it is what it is. Now, if you sit down and chart that out like you might have with a less stupid sentence in middle school or early high school, it does not parse. Either it's missing a question mark somewhere, or there's a superfluous is, but the fact of the matter is, and I promise it, me semantically satiating the word is will not be worth it. There is a superfluous is. And Sean is delivering a sentence that he has rehearsed. He's framing it as something that he's said to almost every client he's ever had. This is something that he rehearses, maybe not necessarily to himself, but he has stood in the mirror and trained himself to deliver this.
For sure.
He is not, it is not him saying, is what it is it is what it is. That superfluous is in the middle cannot be interpreted as somebody repeating themselves. However, what it can be interpreted as is essentially him trying to frame a logical proposition in plain language. And for anybody who has not is not up to date circa 100 years ago with philosophers like Ludwig Wittgenstein and Frege, you can't do logic in normal language. Normal language is not for logic. And what this stinks of to me is the kind of sentence that Rene Descartes or Friedrich Hegel would have said way back in like the 16, 17, and 1800s, of just trying to talk around these things which cannot be framed with normal human language. But first of all, I think it would be possible, and I wasn't able to figure out how. I think it might be possible to reframe this very silly sentence as a logical proposition with an assignment, an equal sign, essentially, in the middle. But if you don't do that, what it also kind of gets at is not just it is what it is, but instead you are operating on either is as the subject of the sentence or is what it is as the subject of the sentence. And in which case, the sentence is saying, in even more expanded and less slightly stupid terms, to say is what it is in the way that, oh, that's crazy, or, well, that's not good. That's a crock of shit is what it is. Or even just the general choice to summarize or to assign label to something is to beg the question of the need to assign the label, which in and of itself is a very convoluted expansion, but definitely more useful rephrasing of "it is what it is," which takes me to my conclusion that this is a joke on people reading Pynchon's earlier work as though it were a holy text. Because this is a sentence where you can think I have thought myself in circles trying to dissect it. And Sean has acted in the same way that Ernie did in the previous chapter, as a voice of Pynchon in moments prior. So to have him deliver such a not meaningless, but such a useless piece of wisdom to Maxine seems like a great prank to pull on his readers, who, as I mentioned earlier, seemed to either view him as a monster who was not capable of writing people, period, or as some holy messiah of sorts. And to have this character who has acted as the author's speaking voice deliver this very convoluted, very tendentious statement is a very funny prank. The end. And I promise you both, that was the abbreviated form of my thoughts.
I mean, kudos for all of that, because that's like an insane amount of work put into 11 words. I think I have nothing to add to that. I think that's a really in-depth look at that, and I hadn't really put that much thought into that specific thing. I knew there was something weird about that sentence that I just didn't like, and I really like the approach that you had there at the end, with it being sort of a prank on the reader, and the way that ties into how people have viewed Pynchon's work. So very well done. I do just want to also just say that in Sean's mind, like I said earlier, there's a lot of meaning in that. But I think everything he says is undercut the moment he says "prepare to copy." All seriousness has gone out the window at that point, and I don't think Maxine's going to believe anything that he says from there on out.
Oh, absolutely. No matter how meaningful one can convince themselves that sentence may or may not be, there's no way that Maxine's taken it anyway seriously.
No.
But like Luke pointed out, it's a great setup for a joke on former President Bill Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Now that nightmare is over, where now words like "is" and "it" mean nothing, Maxine is just trying to allow herself to, as is said explicitly, pretend life is back to normal. And one of those ways that is probably pretty helpful is the realization that her sister Brooke is pregnant, which I thought was a really fun little exchange. It's a very short one,
Mm-hmm.
but just very fun. What's less fun, though, is the way that Avi responds, which seems to be
yeah
falling into a horrible air duster puffing addiction. Just to deliver my PSA after destroying basic words in the English language for all our listeners, I do think that it's important that I, as the person who has maybe in total spoken the most fondly about drug use on this podcast, do not puff air duster.
Yeah. No, that's super bad.
It is incredibly toxic. It destroys your lungs and your airways, as is alluded to with his red eyes, half-closed eyelids, runny nose. It also just demolishes your brain. Do not use air duster.
It is completely irreversible, the damage that it causes to the brain. So yeah, for the love of God, please don't start huffing inhalants.
Beyond the PSA, though, I do think that it's another slightly harrowing scene where Avi is, clearly losing some mental capacity due to this huffing, but he is also just realizing that he has made a bed in hell, to put it away. Do either of you have thoughts on this?
I did like this the interactions between Maxine and Brooke, and then To shift gears entirely and go into how Avi's dealing with it was a little jarring, but I don't want to say it's not surprising. Avi clearly had a lot of plates spinning at the same time, and I don't think it was going to be surprising for readers to see all of that crash down. That being said, I don't think the specific path that he chose was you know, the first thought that would have gone into anyone's mind, but that's where he ends up, and you only can hope that he gets the help he needs and can become a good father.
Yeah, I mean, far better to drink a liter of liquor a day or to start shooting heroin than to start puffing air duster from a health perspective.
Yeah,
Just to underline that point again.
yeah. Just to really hammer home, please do not start huffing inhalants. Please.
Don't drink a liter of liquor or use heroin either, but don't use drugs like that. Period. No matter what they are. But the next moment, and we get some fun juxtaposition with it, is Maxine starting to realize that she might have a bit of an addiction herself. In this case, to in the parlance of today, which I truly hate, but will have to say, a dopamine addiction of exploring things in Deep Archer. And it's gotten to the point where she is starting to fail to distinguish reality from virtual reality, as we discussed much earlier in this episode.
To go into Maxine being addicted to Deep Archer, I do think that if Pynchon was on something like Second Life in the 2000s, I do think that somebody like Pynchon could become addicted to something like Second Life. Whereas for somebody like me, I never got on Second Life. The computers I had that I shared with my family growing up, and the internet connection that we had was never good enough to run basically any kind of cool video games, really. But it does strike me that somebody like Thomas Pynchon would probably like the fact that he could be anyone he wanted to be on a platform like Second Life, even on like internet forums or instant messaging. This also would apply, where he doesn't have to be burdened by the fact that he's Thomas Pynchon, famous reclusive author. He can be whoever he wants to be on the. This is like I said, it kind of just applies to the internet in general. But I could see this being at least somewhat autobiographical in terms of just if I project myself into Pynchon's shoes, I think I would probably enjoy having a break from being Thomas Pynchon if I was Thomas Pynchon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what lends a lot of credence to that, other than the fact that Pynchon is clearly somebody who spent a lot of his life as a much younger person just reading everything in a library. Because, as has been remarked many times before, to write something like Gravity's Rainbow in the modern day would be impressive on its merits as a novel, but the breadth of knowledge depicted in it, or in The Crying of Lot 49, or even V, my least favorite of all of his books, and the worst objectively, requires an intense amount of research that kind of indicates that, yeah, even if it weren't Second Life necessarily, this is the kind of thing that would suck Pynchon in. And the fact is that, I think it was in the press junket for Inherent Vice, he discussed that he kind of viewed Doc Sportello as a bit of like a parallel universe version of himself, where instead of being a writer, he became a PI. And in that book, you also get to see Doc get, sucked into the rabbit hole that is the burgeoning internet at that point in time. And that's when it was just like some research papers mostly. So I think you're completely right. This stuff does seem a lot like the kind of discussions of, if you want to call it that, television addiction in Vineland, or what we see with Horst in this book, where as has been rumored, he spent a lot of years just watching TV, and maybe he was sitting there analyzing it deeply in a way he may or may not regret. Maybe he was just, like you said, trying to take a break from being Thomas Pynchon. this is totally the kind of thing that feels like it's coming from a place of personal understanding. What about you, Cody? Any thoughts on Maxine starting to maybe come to terms with her unhealthy relationship with Deep Archer?
In the same way that a lot of people can identify when they have an addiction and maybe not necessarily be able to come full term with the reality of that addiction, but they can at least understand the compelling urge to go back to this thing more and more. Typically, I think typically stems from it initially being used as some sort of a calming or meditate or not med- sort of like a medicine in a sense, something that you can use to alleviate whatever problems might be causing it. People drink to escape their problems, or they turn to drugs to erase their problems. Similarly, and especially you see it more and more nowadays, you have people that turn to games and television and whatnot to escape that escapism has always existed. It's existed as long. Books are considered a form of escapism in certain areas. So I think it's for her to understand that she has that impulse, that urge to get there. It's a step in the right direction, but it's clearly still consuming her life, and we're seeing the repercussions of it as a result, and her inability to separate what's real and what's not real. And I don't remember if it was on this page or what page it was on specifically, but where she looks at the clock on the wall, does the math, figures 3.5 hours she can't account for. It's kind of scary in a sense to think about that, to look back on that and realize that just that much time was gone, and gone when you're absorbed in something that seems so innocuous and so innocent, but at the same time, you start compounding all of that time over a length of days, weeks, months, and it can start to really cause a lot of problems. Maxine clearly, Deep Archer has a hold on her, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and that segues within the book fairly directly into her realizing that someone's been adding to the file that she has on Nicholas Windust. And, there's kind of, as much as she seems confused by this, we the readers have kind of been told what happened here. Deep Archer had its encryption broken, and Deep Archer is presumably an installed piece of software. It's not just like a euphemism for using the web or whatever. It is something closer to Second Life. And so in the case where something or that kind of anonymity is broken, and you have an installed program that just accesses, in this case, a euphemism for the web. Yeah, if you have a vulnerable web browser and you go to a certain website, somebody can put malware on your computer. And in this case, they're adding stuff to Maxine's file on Nicholas Windust. And like as the book raises the question, I'm going to bring it to y'all. Who do you think is adding on?
That's a good question. I genuinely do not know. There's a part of me that thinks it's someone within the CIA world that would have direct access to Windust, maybe someone that he was reporting to or someone that he worked with who would know that he's involved with her and could either extrapolate just from the conversations had with him, or if they're above him enough, pulling his his files or whatever, and understanding the relationship there, and then utilizing that. It could very well be the same person that called earlier and told her, hey, your kids have school tomorrow, so you might want to go check on them. I like the ambiguity. I think that adds a layer of mystery and horror to it, and that clearly someone has this ability and this knowledge that they can do this, but we don't know who it is, and Maxine doesn't know who it is. I kind of like that it's left unknown, but I don't have any hard evidence to show anybody in particular being responsible.
I would think it was somebody CIA adjacent like Cody. It's just that it's described as strangely non-negative when not outright eulogy material, which of course begs the question of why would somebody log into Maxine's, or like like through the internet, access Maxine's computer and kind of defend Windust if they were part of the apparatus that killed him. I think it's meant to be ambiguous, and that there's not meant to be an easy answer to that question. And I do think it's meant to imply that somehow Windust is from beyond the grave. Maybe not messing with Maxine, but changing the file or something, like trying to explain himself to Maxine. That's what the only, I mean, that's the only real theory I have. It just doesn't really fit into as my own reality. If somebody was doing that to me, I would just assume it was a hacker or the government or something. I wouldn't assume it was a ghost. But in the context of this book, I do think we're meant to assume it's Windust himself somehow doing that.
Yeah, I think having that ambiguity is really important because yeah, I think it would really suck if at the end of this book, either literally or, if you sat and read the book over and over and studied it, that you came away saying, "Well, this was all Maxine being crazy." Because, she's not. And the book it's a novel. It's a Thomas Pynchon novel. The last book of his we covered literally had the dead dragging an FBI operative out of his helicopter and into a car, and then the car out of existence. Like, taking away the magical interpretation, I don't think does anyone any good. But I do have a specific interpretation. Doesn't mean I think any other interpretation is wrong. I just and I will get to that later. But I do personally have interpretation. Though I take this all strangely non-negative when not outright eulogy material slightly more as kind of just making fun of the way that those kinds of files are written, because I just finally got around to reading The Killers of the Flower Moon, and as a result, just Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover's whole vibe has been on the mind recently. And that's just kind of what he did to law enforcement in the US, is enforce this weird attitude of like frame things as pseudo journalistically as possible so that you leave no room for interpretation, but also so that you can have plausible deniability for leaving things out of it. But it does leave open the opportunity that it might be Windust. Because yeah, he's not going to say anything bad about himself. He's not going to frame anything except for how he viewed it.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it, I think, especially because I've been saying since whenever we started talking about the other people within Deep Archer that it's felt to me a little bit like a sort of limbo almost for what would be the modern era Thanatoids. Which with when Lester comes in a little bit later in here, I think kind of adds to my holding of that theory that. And if Windust if he is the one behind all of this, that's doing this and updating his file and whatnot, that could be a part of it. They in his death and in this state that he's in, he still has the ability to manipulate data within the program itself. Obviously, he can't do anything outside of that, but he would certainly have the power to do so within it if he was smart enough. And he's shown himself to be a smart person. He's just an asshole, but. That theory, I think I like that in that sense.
Regardless, it is a very open question, and that continuing on these lovely slippery segues, which is so much of that very Vineland type of segue. We get Lester again. Maxine just stumbles across him in Deep Archer and decides to approach him as though it's actually him, which is strange because this is the first time we've seen a conversation with someone who may or may not be dead. In this case, we know he's dead, who knows that they're dead. And that might just be, Lester having been approached by other people saying, "Hey, I saw you in the papers, man. What's it like to be dead?" And him just learning that, whatever this construct is. Or it might be, "Oh, it's not actually him." Or it might be him having realized he's dead because he's been dead for like a year now. I don't know. I don't quite know what to make of this conversation. Do either of you have solid thoughts on it?
I only in the same sense that, like I was mentioning earlier about this Thanatoid connection here, where he's essentially aware of the situation and knows he still exists in a form, be it not his truly physical form. But I don't know. I mean, it's clear that he's had interactions with other people because he's his response to Maxine. I was really intrigued by his response that he's not dead, he's a refugee from his life, which makes me wonder if is his existence in Deep Archer a sort of, I don't want to say heaven, but is it a sort of afterlife? Is this a place to which certain departed souls go? But then that opens a whole bunch of other questions up that I don't think are relevant to the book in any way, shape, or form. But it's a really interesting interaction between them, and I especially when she starts wondering whether it's really him or if it's Igor or Misha or Grisha. Yeah, I don't know. Outside of the Thanatoid thing, I don't really have much else to add to that.
Yeah, I for one really enjoyed I think I used too many articles to be one of them. Yeah, no, I think that the interpretation of it as, like Vineland was, like whatever the afterlife was or is in this supernatural interpretation of things. I mean, this doesn't answer any questions except that, there is an awareness. It's not like some weird unself-aware purgatory.
I do also like the last thing Lester tells her. Lost down here is the whole point. Take a good look at the surface web sometime. Tell me it isn't a sorry picture. Big favor you'd be doing, Maxine. It lends a lot more mystery to what exactly Deep Archer has become at this point, because we've seen it depart greatly from what it started as and build out into what it has become. And it makes me wonder if Lester is happier being in Deep Archer than he was in the real world, despite losing whatever he had in the real world. That's just an interesting way to end that conversation between those two.
Yeah, and it does connect back to that Thanatoid thing, where
Mhm.
kind of the struggle I had with the Thanatoids as they're discussed in Vineland, and the way they're kind of implied to be discussed in this book and some of the others, is that it is said almost explicitly in that book that you become a Thanatoid by just sitting and watching TV, and at the same time that the Thanatoids are metaphysically the same as the people who are in the afterlife. And so there is this intersection between people fleeing, maybe consciously, maybe just out of addiction to distraction. But it bring the question to, is Maxine on her road to joining Lester there, even if
Yeah.
she doesn't get killed?
Yeah, because that's not really ever addressed directly in this book. Like you mentioned with Vineland, it's you can become a Thanatoid by just getting absorbed in the TV, but the implication seems to be the same here, but we're never really explicitly told that that's the case. And I'm wondering if Maxine has the ability to understand that, really, that she can get lost completely in there.
Yeah, and it turns out that where she might be getting lost is a slightly redacted and outdated version of her hometown, renamed as Zygotisopolis, because Ziggy
Real
and
mouthful.
Otis, right? Yeah, because Ziggy and Otis decided to digitize a pre 9/11 version of Manhattan and put it in Deep Archer, which seems like it would be a monumental effort for anybody, especially two kids who are, doing things in their life.
Mm-hmm. I think prior to having kids, I would have thought the same, but especially seeing what kids can do with just with Minecraft and the things they can build within there, it's not outside of the realm of possibility. I think it is in the sense that the technology would have maybe inhibited their ability to do that, but the sort of creativity that flows within kids, especially at that age, it's not too surprising. I do really like the fact they not just rebuilt a pre-September 11th New York, but they sort of made it into a kind of utopia where they added, bars offering free lunches and took away the sort of corporatization of things. They let the Hayden Planetariums there, and the Commodore Hotel is a pre-Trump Commodore Hotel. So they're kind of romanticizing it and turning it into the thing it was before it became the thing it was.
Absolutely, yeah. My incredulity is not that kids wouldn't have the ambitions or the capacity to get pretty far along on it. In the moment, I forgot that it is phrased as the boys have located graphics files for a version of NYC. Because I was just kind of thinking, yeah, no, I mean, Ziggy and Otis are ambitious and clever kids, and the work that they have done is quite impressive. But I was just thinking for the moment of them literally, personally,
Like building it whole cloth.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the
That
crazy part.
Yeah, that's okay. 100% agree.
Yeah, still, I mean, like you're saying, it's a lot of work they put into this pre-existing images to make it what Zygotosopolis is.
Mhm.
And it's such a given the context a little bit too grim to say fun, but a cool scene and a cool idea of this being what these kids have decided to do is to build a replica of what New York City should be in their eyes.
Yeah, it's a really heartwarming scene, I think, to see them have the opportunity to make this world, and this is what they choose to make it. Because so often you would think that the kids their age, especially, would make some hypersexualized, hyper-violent world that they could go get out their worst tendencies and their worst thoughts and everything. But what they make is this really wholesome and just very sweet thing that they just want to have the world that could have been and that was taken away from them before they had the opportunity to really live in it.
Yeah, and as much as I want to read it cynically, and I will insist upon doing so personally. I'm gonna read on page 429. Ziggy has his arm over his brother's shoulder, and Otis is looking up at him with unhesitating adoration. They are ambling around in this not yet corrupted screenscape, at home in it already, unconcerned for their safety, salvation, destiny. And as much as, again, I have reservations about feeling good about this scene, that's a wonderful moment. That's, those are kids being kids, looking around at something they spent a lot of time on, loving one another as brothers, and loving this thing that they were both born into and did help make better in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. And I love that Maxine just watches from the background and doesn't make herself known. She has the opportunity to, but she chooses to just let them have the thing that they made between them.
Yeah, and there's a ton of stuff that you could dig into thematically about, like, this being another form of just escaping reality or whatever. But I'm not going to elaborate on it because I don't need to. The next thing that happens is that the book explicitly says that Maxine is starting to struggle to differentiate actual Manhattan, actual New York City from Zygotosopolis. And the next thing that actually happens is that she sees a plastic top from a 9-inch aluminum takeout container rolling down the block in the wind. On its edge, an edge as thin as a pre-dawn dream, keeps trying to fall over, but the airflow or something, unless it's some nerd at a keyboard, keeps it upright for an implausible distance. Half a block, waits for the light, then half a block more till it finally rolls off the curb under the wheels of a truck that's pulling out and gets flattened. Real? Computer animated? This, I think, is all of this alone is plenty of reason to justify your theory about Windust's body not actually being in that reality, or at least, Maxine finding it and that scene not actually happening in reality. Because, that's not possible. That didn't happen in real life. So what else is she confusing?
Yeah. And to tie that back, I think and I should have mentioned this when we were initially talking about it, but what tipped me off initially to the possibility when Maxine found Windust's body of that not really happening in the real world was the fact that the dogs acted the way they did. You have a person coming into a situation where these pack dogs essentially are eating, which that's the time that they're going to be the most aggressive and most territorial, and she just manages to talk them out of doing anything and walk off. That's, I think, a sort of equivalent to this physics defying container lid rolling down the street the way that it does. I think it's a big clue that something's very, very not right in the world that she's in.
Yeah, once again, not to disagree really, but just
Disagree with you.
no,
I'm not saying I'm absolutely right.
no, and I'm not I'm not just like giving you space so I don't contradict you. I do mean it. Like I don't. You're not. I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not just backing off like a dog with a laser pointer on its forehead. But I do genuinely think that makes as much sense as what I'm about to say, which is that I read that detail as, you know, she's seeing the lady with the alligator purse. She's projecting all of these things into the world, whether it's because again, you know, even if Windust wasn't there, even if that scene was in Deep Archer, even if all of those things, even if that interpretation is true, so much of that scene could not have been made by anybody but Maxine, that it is her being delusional to some extent or another. And I
Yeah.
see where
you're coming from.
and I took the dog moment not as the dogs weren't there and she was projecting them into reality, or that, you know, the dogs didn't actually walk away and Maxine is dead in the apartment, but that, you know, she's standing there and she's thinking of herself in those noiry terms. She's thinking of herself as this, you know, James Bond type who's walked in to find the femme fatale of this particular book, just gender swap, dead on the floor being eaten by dogs. And in reality, yes, stray dogs eating a body are not going to be happy to walk away. But also in reality, dogs aren't stupid. They know that when a person is standing there and you are, from the dog's perspective, you are growling at them, and this person is still standing there, and they are just looking at you, and they are talking at you, and they have something in their hands pointed at you. Dogs might not be able to use tools more than very limited ways. They understand that humans do magic.
That's true.
They understand that if a person is standing there staring them down, they have a reason to be doing that. And if the dog has already eaten, it's gonna say, all right, now worth dealing with this crazy lady at the very least.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think you're wrong. I think we're talking about two angles on.
Yeah, approaching the same situation from two different sides. Yeah.
And furthermore, after lunch at a hummus joint where you can't always rule out psychedelic toxins in the tabbouleh, she runs into Uncle Dizzy, who we've been vaguely introduced to before, right? Like he's been brought up.
Yeah, she's had some brief interactions with him. And
well, Uncle Dizzy provides her with I think what can safely be called a riff on the One Ring.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, makes her apparently disappear. She doesn't believe it, hands the ring over to him. He puts it on and he disappears, I think for good as far as this book's concerned. Yeah. And I choose to believe that in this particular case, as you know, like I said, I think that the Nicholas Windust apartment scene might not have been real. It might have been in Deep Archer. I totally think that the 9-inch aluminum takeout container lid is not real. I choose to believe that Uncle Dizzy did find a magic ring.
He found the One Ring.
Yeah,
and he throwed it out of there. Yep.
But any thoughts beyond just general appreciation for the humor of that scene?
I just enjoyed it for what it was. It was just a funny little interlude between Maxine's sweet moment with the boys and her upcoming conversation with Eric.
And, well, that conversation with Eric involves his man Ketone, who I much earlier in the book, like the first or second episode we discussed this book, I mentioned that ketone as a word was relevant to some particular theory I was pontificating on at the time. And so there's that. But beyond just pointing back to that hanging identifier, because, it feels like it would be silly to not point it out. She accompanies Eric with Ketone to get a fake ID made, and they have a conversation about some of those weird reality distortions that Maxine has been experiencing. And Eric clearly, would at least agree with my Uncle Dizzy opinion. Thinks that the Montauk Project is altering reality. So Eric has been, again, to use a term of our day, he has been blackpilled on the internet. He's done. He's decided that he's gonna start some kind of civil war, and I don't know what he thinks he's gonna do, and I don't think he knows what he's gonna
I was
do.
about to say I don't think he does either.
But it is a nice moment because we've seen Eric go from a complete layabout who does nothing but illegally go into seedy strip clubs to somebody who develops a real human attachment for once, to somebody who gains a sense of justice and decides that he's going to do whatever he's gonna do here. He's gonna foment a revolution, at least in the internet. And as is remarked upon, him saying that he's gonna go foment a revolution was apparently his way of telling Maxine he's leaving town. And the only way she finds out about that is because Driscoll is pretty torn up about it and tells her in an email. Any thoughts on that section?
Only that Eric seems like exactly the kind of person who would break up with someone over email.
As we return back to the home life concerns of Maxine, turns out that Horst, because he does nothing but watch really weird biopics, in this case, the Fred McMurray story, because of his weird isolation from all of these changing things, he has become the whole family's grounding point, where they go verify whether anything they're talking about or thinking about or have seen is real, which is, I guess a nice thing. Heidi, on the other hand, just really thinks that Maxine is caught up in what she calls the old Grenada Asbury Park uncertainty question, which has apparently been around forever. And she very, very aggressively, well, passive aggressive being Heidi, tells Maxine to go online, read about it. And it turns out that the reason they're having this conversation is that they are at the Lufthansa business class departure lounge while Heidi's waiting for Conkling Speedwell to join her. Well, she's going to join him, I guess, on a trip to Munich, where he is going to be able to use what did they call it? A smell lab?
I think that's what they referred to it as.
A forensic lab equipped for Hitler's cooties workup. I guess because Conkling, it seems, has finally met his destiny of referring to Hitler as the Fuhrer, and has purchased a bottle of his cologne and wants to verify that it's actually Hitler's cologne. And I really don't know what to make of all that, because Conkling Speedwell is a strange character.
Yeah.
And it's been foreshadowed that he might have an unhealthy relationship to this particular historical figure. But it does seem like a bit of a stretch for him to start calling him the Fuhrer, the living Fuhrer.
Yeah.
It is odd to me that he's going to Germany with like a piece of Nazi memorabilia to confirm that it's Nazi memorabilia. I can't imagine the people at the whatever the thing is in Munich are going to be super excited to work on that. I imagine that would probably be pretty controversial in Germany if the authorities found out about it and stuff.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't go over well.
But I guess fortunately for all of us non-neo-Nazis, maybe fortunately, I don't know. I don't think there are any stakes here. He does get caught trying to sneak the flask of cologne past security as though it was going to be tampered with if he put it through the scanners. Which, if nothing else, is proof that neo-Nazis are all crazy. We really needed that one to be nailed down, and this did it.
Yep.
But we finally get the long-awaited return, and I think it's actually the third time he's appeared in the book, which, is just nice save the cat type story plotting, of Marvin,
Mm-hmm.
the delivery cyclist who, brought Maxine the USB drive containing the Windows dossier and Reg's footage from hash slingers and the Stinger missile stuff.
Mhm.
And this time he's in much more normal clothing, apparently, and has brought to her some footage which appears to be shot by Reg Despard of Eric driving the two of them in, I think it's a panel van. I can't find the quote, but I've interpreted it that way.
That's what I came away with also. I do like the fact that she knows it's Reg because of his shitty framing.
Yeah. I said earlier that Reg doesn't appear again. Apparently I slightly misspoke because, yeah, he didn't appear again, but he is talking to somebody who does appear at least. And so, apparently Reg is still alive, and Reg totally could have been on the phone with Maxine. So there's my mea culpa. It's important, to keep yourself accountable.
Yeah.
That's how you don't fall into Deep Archer
Exactly.
or puffing air duster.
Yeah.
Apparently, Eric is on some other plan. He says it's not even Fort Sumter. He's not trying to start his civil war yet. They are just doing something with a bunch of servers in the back of a van. And that's about as much information as we get, which is just, it's pregnant with possibilities.
What is the actual feasibility of doing something like that? I'm not really familiar with how all of that would work. Is it possible to have a mobile server set up like that?
It's totally possible. Okay, so just to point to the proof of the concept,
Mhm.
have you heard of Stingrays, the cell phone, the cell tower spoofing thing that
No.
police use? Okay, well, and anyway, it's I might even be misremembering what they're called, but there are various different specific implementations of it that are essentially mobile telephone poles that police, technically the FBI or the DEA have to be involved, I think, but you know, police will often drive around these mobile cell towers essentially,
Mhm.
and spoof the proper telecom to capture and operate wiretaps on modern cell phones. Because back in the day, a wiretap, you literally spliced wire into the telephone line. With cell
Right.
phones, you have to be a little more creative about it. And the way that those work are essentially the same way that this would work. The issue with them doing this in 2002 is really that anything you're doing with those servers, if you're not just like doing some kind of computationally complex thing and using servers because they're often very powerful computers, is that any way you're connecting that to the internet, whether it's satellite internet or you're using cell service, back in 2002, the bandwidth would be god awful. And so I'm not sure what you would be providing except for the equivalent of like a chat room or like a text forum. Which, if you're trying to foment a revolution very slowly, I guess that might be all you need. But yeah, you're driving around trying to keep people being, somebody with satellite heat signature technology, or somebody just trying to track down the servers in a more traditional way. Keeping them on the move so that every time you connect to the internet, you can't be physically found, at least not easily, not without finding you first and then following you from place to place.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what they are doing. I could come up with things, but it would just be
They
spitballing.
they probably aren't sure either, to be fair. So
Very possibly, yeah. But you have a wonderful moment where not only do you get a fun little exchange about how Eric and Reg reconnected, where they just ran into each other because they were just, Reg is working at Microsoft and Eric was trying to hack in to get some specific information, and they ran into each other almost literally. And then Horst just wanders into the room and is like, huh, two guys driving a truck outside
Mhm.
what, Bozeman? And Horst just starts driveling on about how they should go out to the you know northern Midwest sometime and just hang out, which is some great character from Horst, who
Yeah.
at this point seems like a statue. But at the end of, or not at the end, but in the video, they say, "Hey, Maxine, throw this DVD in the microwave once you're done watching it. Nobody can know what we're doing." And it just kind of cuts off at the end with no explanation of what they're doing in any way, shape, or form, which, from the perspective of trying to pull off a revolution is the smart thing to do. But really, why send the disc to Maxine? Why do that? That's
Right.
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I couldn't really figure that out either. It doesn't seem like there's any coded references in there that Maxine's supposed to be looking for. There's no nudge, nudge, wink, wink from either of them for her to look for anything. It's just kind of a weird, like, checking in with mom kind of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly the vibe. But, Eric does give her some probably useful advice, saying that I'm not using Deep Archer anymore. Too compromised, too commercialized. We won't be able to get in contact too easily anymore, but I will reach out sometime. Don't go looking for me. You can't handle it.
Yeah, nice little way to end that video.
As has been pretty clear, I don't think anyone needs to be reminded. Maxine learns her lessons, and she fast forwards around looking for more hidden tracks, which is funny and kind of like the way of, again, this is being written by a 70-something-year-old man. That's not how you would hide a file on a DVD,
Yeah,
but whatever.
it's not a Marvel post credit scene.
Yeah, but compromises for the sake of readability,
Yeah, yeah.
at least. Do either of you have any further thoughts on chapter 38?
Nothing for me.
I don't have anything.
So, as we move on to chapter 39, Maxine is on a subway, remembering other times that she's on the subway, and comparing the people around to tarot cards, who, try as I might, I cannot identify with any of the actual major arcana.
Yeah, I couldn't either. I don't know that it's meant to like map onto any of them. It just seems like she's kind of making up new ones.
Yeah, that's how I read it. But
You never
always
know though.
always fun to try.
Yeah, that's true.
But this day, or at least some other day that's just like this one, she sees somebody in the window of the other train who seems to indicate that she wants to talk, and somehow communicates, "Hey, get off at the next stop, and we will rendezvous." And this section is, I think, really beautifully written. But thankfully, for the sake of our listeners, I don't know if there's very much to talk about. It's just really lovely the way it's put.
Yeah, it's just done in a very reminiscent of the hard boiled genre again, where this stranger on a train is convincing Maxine to come and talk to her because she has a message for her. Which, as someone who doesn't like talking to people I don't know, gives me severe anxiety. The idea that a stranger would like try to get me to follow them somewhere so they could give me a message, I just don't want to do that. So kudos to Maxine for having more social courage than I do.
Well, she's I guess a financial spy.
Yeah,
Needs
she's
to have eyes open, ears cocked.
and she's in the middle of a mystery, so she's got to follow every breadcrumb trail.
And it turns out that it's not just a random person who wants to talk to her, because she hands Maxine an envelope. And would either of you like to read that paragraph and then like the note?
The envelope doesn't have to get closer to her snoot than a foot and a half before there it is. The unmistakable odor of regret, bad judgment, unproductive mourning. 9:30 cologne for men. Maxine is taken by a chill. Nick Windust is staggered forth again from the grave, hungry, unappeasable, and she doubts whatever's in the envelope that she needs to see it. There's writing on the outside. Here's the money I owe you. Sorry it isn't the earring. Adios.
So yeah, but between the writing on the envelope, the cologne, and I do think it's interesting that I don't think there would have been any reason for it, but Maxine certainly hasn't seen Windust's handwriting before this moment, so that's not a signifier to her. But hey, it isn't the earrings; it's the cologne, so it's Windust, at least enough for her. And inside is all the money that she lent him, expecting never to see it again. And not slightly, even more surprisingly, there's some interest. And she realizes who this woman is and asks, basically, are you Xiomara? Who answers with a wry smile, because, again, this is a noir.
Yep.
And, well, they kind of brief each other on their days. And they just kind of make each other's acquaintance, and they decide that they're gonna walk along to the Brooklyn Bridge. And Maxine, it seems, just can't get enough of berating herself. It says, Jewish mother default, switch in, you eat breakfast? So we get over in Brooklyn, we'll eat again. And then she frames it later as they start off cautiously enough politely before either of them knows it. It's turning into morning talk show TV. Had lunch with the ex-husband's ex-girlfriend. And she ascertains that this money came through Dottie, who is Windust's more recent wife. And that is also confirmed. And before we get into anything further, do either of you, what do you make of Xiomara appearing at this very late moment?
Yeah, it's very, as you mentioned, it's very noir. It feels perfectly in line with the genre and the way that it tends to structure these kind of moments. And the use not just of her, but to bring Dottie into the mix as well, just adds to that whole feel. It's really, I don't know, it's just a really fascinating setup, and one that I like the fact that they both just accept it for what it is. There's no like aggressive confrontation or any kind of jealousy or animosity between them. They just both know, like they both know who each other are, and there's no surprise that Windust had these multiple relationships and kept in contact with everybody that he kept in contact with, and it's just accepted as being what it is. It is what it is, as Sean would say.
I believe you mean is what it is. Is it is what it is.
Thank you. I forgot the first part of gobbledygook that went in there.
It's these 11 words have suddenly become very important to me.
It is. I mean, it does seem somewhat random. The whole the meeting on the subway. Like, how would Xiomara know where Maxine is? How would she find her in that way? Although Windust finds her in a similarly odd way earlier in the book, and even the meeting at the marathon. that we went over last week, could have been not a coincidence. Yeah, I just find it very interesting that it's pretty cool, and like Cody said, very noirish the way that Xiomara gets Maxine's attention, the way that whole scene goes down.
It feels so out of nowhere because obviously, no, not obviously, as you both said, it is intensely noirish, but it came out of nowhere so much for me that I had completely forgotten that she appears in the book at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like something that you might remember, but apparently not me. But it's interesting to see not a different side to Windust, really, because what we hear from Xiomara is a lot of kind of what we know about him. But it's interesting to see this person who met him when he was younger, less corrupted, as Maxine kind of wondered when she first got the dossier on Windust. And, just reading that far into the book, it's pretty easy to say, well, she probably died, or he probably just completely abandoned her somewhere.
Mhm.
And as they make their way to the Brooklyn Bridge, turns out not anything that simple happened. And I'm just gonna skim really briefly over what the backstory is on Windust. Basically, Windust and Xiomara met in Guatemala and had something of a whirlwind romance. And then one day, all of his employers, all the people that represented the reason he was there, disappeared. And so he realized, well, I need to get out of here too, and you are probably in danger for having gotten married to me. So he finds a way to have the company, as it's phrased, get them an annulment. He gives her an engagement ring that doesn't fit so that she can pawn it. And they part ways while fleeing from the loose cabal of neoliberal interests that he was serving. But along the way, we get these nice little moments of parts that are explicit, Xiomara speaking, sharing her memories, some other parts that are just the narrator filling in. And it's a wonderful backstory dump in the sense that it doesn't feel confusing to have those jumps between kind of this omniscient view and this very situated one. And it's just kind of a testament to all the reasons that people respect Thomas Pynchon as an author on a purely technical level.
Yeah, I mean, there's you could unpack a lot from this part of the chapter, and we could go on and on and on about it. There's a lot of South American folklore that's built into it, especially with the mention of Zabalba. The one thing I really wanted to kind of touch on was when Xiomara says, "I loved him. I must have thought I could save him, and in the end, it was Windust who saved me." I was curious for y'all's thoughts on that, strictly in the sense of I loved him. I must have thought I could save him. Clearly parallels Maxine's feelings towards Windust as well. But whether or not she loved him is up for debate because it's never explicitly stated. But she definitely has feelings for him, and she definitely thought she could fix him. That much was explicitly stated several times by Maxine. What do you take from Xiomara saying that in the end it was Windust who saved her? Was it because, again, I mean, obviously he literally saved her by getting her out of Guatemala, Mexico, and beyond there. Is there more to it than that? Do you think that Windust and understanding what he was and who he was, he stood for, and all that, allowed her to become a better person and to find her true self? Or is it more of just the literal, he literally helped me escape a dangerous situation, and I owe him my life because of it?
I mean, she calls herself a foolish little girl throughout this.
Mhm.
Whether I'm not sure how much we are able to take anything she says at face value, not to say that she's lying, but that the fact of the matter is that he did literally save her life. She probably would have died in the genocide that was happening in Guatemala at this time.
Right.
And she needed to come up with a way to cope with that. And that way seems to have been by disregarding any of the things that she was raised to believe in, but to disregard herself as a younger person, like the same person who fell in love with Windust. And what she is now is the same kind of person that Windust was. Maybe not as psychopathic or as deeply in bed with the kind of private mercenary groups that he was, but she kind of, in order to cope with this horrible thing that she barely avoided, she has adopted that ideology.
Yeah, I like that question a lot. I mean, you could just kind of take it literally in that, Xiomara was living, in what I think is a rural part of Guatemala. Probably wasn't, I would assume was not super well off if she's involved with like leftist revolutionaries and stuff like that. And Windus took her from a life of poverty to life in America, where she's doing panels at Columbia. Um, I want to say it's described as dress, or she. I don't know. I got the impression that she was dressed fashionably. I'm not sure if that's in the text or not, but she does seem like a cultured, kind of high class woman who has her shit together. I think it could just be taken, Windus saved her from a life of endless poverty, and gave like it is definitely a thing in places like Guatemala, that America is kind of the holy land, the promised land, the land of opportunity. And without Windus, would Xiomara have made it to America? I find that kind of doubtful. In terms of her being saved in a less literal sense, I get kind of confused with that because I don't really know what she would have been saved from, if that makes sense. He doesn't seem like the type of person with like the emotional capacity to, or the emotional depth to really change somebody's personality all that much, I guess is
Mhm.
maybe what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and it's it isn't explicitly said how long they spent together in Guatemala, but it can't have been more than a couple of years at most.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of interesting details within all of that. She grew up in Huehuetenango, which is these days closer to a not a city, but it is closer to like what we would call civilization. We would call it like an unincorporated territory or
Oh, yeah, yeah,
unincorporated,
yeah.
yeah, place in the U.S. That's what we would call it, but in Guatemala, that he grew up in Huehuetenango, and so she was right in the heart of where this brutal genocidal dictator came from. And I don't know anything about him personally. I forgot his name. But one thing that is pretty common between the kinds of people who commit genocide as dictators, they often hold deep hatred for the people that they grew up around, and
Mhm.
very often target them for severe punishment, whatever that means in particular. So even if she would have flown on under the radar otherwise, very likely that she or the village she grew up in would have been particularly picked out by the ruler. And we get some discussion of those Maya folk tales, in particular Xibalba, which is translated here as the place of fear. And we kind of get like a resonance with the idea of Windust's continued existence in Deep Archer by him believing that he himself was not the one who was committing the atrocities in service of putting Rios in power. And I was curious if either of you had any interpretations on that.
I hadn't thought about that, but I mean, it tracks. If Because I was mentioning earlier about it being a potential sort of afterlife of some sorts, and I could definitely see that. My only thing is, as I understand it, Zabalba there was like a number of trials that you had to go through in order to pass through. So, it may not be like a one-to-one correlation between the two, but I think the only part where I would maybe not be able to subscribe to that idea is that there's not a mention of any kind of trials or ordeals that one has to go through to get into Deep Archer, unless it's just not stated in the story. That's just left to the reader. But I like the idea of it as serving as that as a sort of afterlife for people like Windust. That's yeah. I mean, it tracks with Pynchon for sure.
Yeah, Deep Archer to me kind of reminds me more of like a purgatory than necessarily an underworld. You could even view Deep Archer as a type of heaven, even where you're disembodied. You're not having to worry about your physical self as much as you are worried about your metaphysical self. I do find it interesting that the two are linked and repeatedly, like the afterlife and Deep Archer repeatedly linked. I don't know. I mean, you could even maybe interpret it as Pynchon predicting in the future some type of. Have you all seen San Junipero, the Black Mirror episode?
Yeah.
Pynchon kind of maybe predicting or commenting on the possibility that might be in humanity's future. It is called this book is called Bleeding Edge and does deal with computing and computer science and all that a lot. That's definitely a stretch, but I think you could interpret it that way.
Yeah, I'm not. So I know very little about Xibalba as a mythic location. I really only know the kind of stuff that's in this chapter. So yeah, I'm not sure if or what you can take out of the parallel between the two. I see such a strong parallel between the fact that we have this parallel of the dead Windust in reality and the living Windust but confused in Deep Archer, and then go back like 40 or not 40 but 20, 30 years, and he's consciously going through his life actively kind of dissociating himself from his actions in that way, and that's
Mhm.
I mean it's intense, and I don't know what to make of it, because again, it's one of those things where Maxine going through his dossier was like imagining a younger Windust, and kind of to the extent where that she has anything you might consider love, or had anything you might consider love for Windust. It seems like it probably came out of her imagining him as a young man. And so to see, this woman who we don't get an age estimation, and she doesn't say her age, but probably similar to Maxine's.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. There's a nice little moment where somebody had written "Sal si puedes, motherfuckers" in lipstick on a cubicle wall, which translates to "Get out if you can" and "motherfuckers," which is not a direct parallel, but all of the Monty Python-esque stuff in all of these books, but even this one in particular, it's a lot like the "Exeunt Romanes" thing.
I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
Beyond that, in this chapter, very little actually happens. You get this backstory on Nicholas Windust, which, again, we could. There's a lot of things we could dig into, and if either of you have more questions or thoughts you want to share, I welcome it. But as it stands, I don't know if there's much value in mulling it over in general, because it's just some really lovely writing, some lovely character development on the part of both Nicholas Windust as a younger man and Xiomara.
It is a very nice chapter. And I like the backstory that we get on Windust, the backstory we get on Xiomara. This kind of feels like the scene in Vineland where Brock is with Vato and Blood, and that it's dealing with all the mythology and concluding that specific antagonist's arc. Yeah, it's a wonderful conversation between Xiomara and Maxine, and I think it's best just to leave it as is right there.
Well, the chapter ends with Xiomara saying that hell doesn't have to be underground; it can be in the sky, which seems, again, poignant somehow, but not in a way that can really be easily connected to anything. She elaborates on Windust, saying that Dottie told her that he visited after September 11th a few more times, but that she thinks that he's back down in Xibalba, reunited with his evil twin, and they part ways, and Maxine falls asleep, saying good night, Nick. And I just love that whole chapter. It's beautiful.
It really is. There's some absolutely stunning writing in.
Any funny parts that we didn't cover already?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up when Maxine was staying at her parents' place, the car that seems to annually blast the Godfather theme while they drive down the street. I don't know what it is about that. I just find that amusing that that person operates on some sort of clockwork, that they continually do that every year, and that that's their choice of music to play at high volume while driving down the street in the middle of the night.
It's just such a. I mean, these chapters are so surreal, and that
Yeah.
particular moment is hilarious.
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight that I think that the line in chapter 39, it was like the old Mexican joke, de Guatemala a Guatepeor. That translates as from Guata bad to Guata worse,
Mhm.
which is a real thing that some some Mexican folks will say. And just to give some context on why some Guatemalan people might view the U.S. as the promised land, as Luke alluded to, it's not a great place to live, you know. But also, just to be clear, I think the attitude on that joke now is that it's pretty tasteless. So it's
Yeah.
not like,
Yeah.
it's not a good thing. It's not like accepted, but it is a fun inclusion because you can totally imagine somebody like Xiomara, in her 30s, 40s, 50s, however old in particular she would be at this point, having having thought a lot about that phrase.
Mhm.
Well, how about just quotes in general? Any highlight quotes from either of you?
I will go with on at the opening of chapter 39. Sometimes down in the subway, a train Maxine's riding on will slowly be overtaken by a local or an express on the other track, and in the darkness of the tunnel, as the windows of the other train move slowly past, the lighted panels appear one by one, like a series of fortune-telling cards, being dealt and slid in front of her. The scholar, the unhoused, the warrior thief, the haunted woman. After a while, Maxine has come to understand that the faces framed in these panels are precisely those out of all the city millions she must, in the hour, be paying most attention to. In particular, those whose eyes actually meet her own. They are the day's messengers from whatever the beyond has for a third world, where the days are assembled one by one under non-union. Each messenger carrying the props required for their character: chopping bag, books, musical instruments, arrived here out of darkness, bound again into darkness, with only a minute to deliver the intelligence Maxine. At some point, naturally, she begins to wonder if she might not be performing the same role for some face looking back out another window at her. Just absolutely beautiful writing, and sets that very noirish feel that we talked about at the beginning of chapter 39. It's a wonderful insight into Maxine, which these chapters, as we've talked about, have been just kind of full of a lot of Maxine's internal thoughts. So it's really an interesting way to see how she's looking at the world at this part of the story now.
Yeah, it's really incredible writing because yeah, if you're just sitting there watching people in a subway, I try to make some symbolism or try to draw connections with real tarot cards, but that's also just it's a really good way to portray like what it's like to sit on public transit and see the same kind of person over and over again.
So my quote comes from the bottom of 411. On the way out, she passes a mirror, takes an automatic look, sees a blurred moving figure, maybe herself, likely something else. The lady again, all in shadow except for a single highlight off her wedding band, whose color, if you could taste light, which for a moment she imagines she can, you'd have to call faintly bitter. I just really like the imagery there. possibly because of my past drug experiences I've experienced, and possibly just in general. It's hard to tell the difference because it's been a few years since I really experienced synesthesia, but I used to experience it a good amount. But that I like that depiction of synesthesia. I just really like that paragraph a lot. And yeah, I guess she is wearing her wedding band, which I think we talked about earlier, if whether or not she's wearing her wedding band or not.
The way that whole scene, but in particular that it kind of peaks in that paragraph, it melds the narrative reality with Maxine's perspective is beautiful. I guess my favorite paragraph is probably on page 444, chapter 39. Automatic rifle fire every night, irregular pulses of flame-colored light above the tree lines. Villagers began leaving. One morning, Windust found the office he'd been working out of abandoned and cleared of everything sensitive. No sign of any of the neoliberal scum he'd oozed into town with, perhaps owing to the appearance overnight of ill-disposed country folk carrying machetes. Somebody had written "Sal si puedes, motherfuckers" in lipstick on a cubicle wall. A 55-gallon oil drum out in back, full of ashes and charred paperwork, was still seeping smoke. Not a Yankee in sight, let alone the Israeli and Taiwanese marks they'd been coordinating with. All of them suddenly gathered back into the invisible. Gave me about a minute to pack a bag. The blouse I wore at our wedding, some family photographs, a sock with a roll of Quetzals in it, a little Sig Sauer 22 caliber handgun he was never comfortable with and insisted I take. Something about the irregular pulses of flame-colored light above the tree lines.
Yeah, that's great.
Because it's one of those things where, like, irregular pulses of flame-colored light is obvious. It's just fire. Things are burning. There's no need to put it like that, but it just paints the picture perfect.
Mhm.
And that brings us to most Pinchonian parts. Any particularly Pinchonian moments stand out to y'all?
I think I would go with the Maxine and Ernie conversation, if only because it quite literally feels like Pinchon just there and talking to us through Ernie.
I already went with this, and we already talked about it a good amount with Scooby Goes Latin. It's very Pinchonian to make up a whole Scooby Doo episode and describe it in detail for 2 or 3 paragraphs, and then end it with a groaner of a pun. He spends 3 paragraphs setting up that pun. It's just a very Pinchonian thing to do.
For sure.
Yeah, as much as I don't love the joke, and nobody can convince me otherwise, it is incredibly Pynchon. Since you already mentioned it, I guess I'll point to very similarly the Marx Brothers take on Don Giovanni.
For sure.
Because these are all very typical Pynchon chapters. I can't imagine anyone else writing these. Yeah, those moments are deeply in his style.
Yeah.
So that about wraps us up for this episode, covering chapters 37 through 39 of Bleeding Edge. We'll see you next week for chapters 40 and 41, which means that, in a sense, this is the penultimate episode of us covering the book, because we'll have a wrap-up episode, but
there's only one more set of chapters. Yeah, it's weird. Every time we get to the end of a book, it's weird. I know it's coming, but it just feels weird that we're there.
if you like what we're doing and you want to support the show, please consider making a donation on Ko-Fi. Funds we receive will be used to upgrade equipment, pay hosting fees, and help make the show better in general. You can find us there on ko-fi.com/mappingthezone. And as always, thank you for listening. I've been Will.
I've been Cody.
I'm Luke.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.